If you're a high-income professional under the impression that you are unable to contribute directly to a Roth IRA, you may actually be correct. But importantly, there are a variety of, call them legal backdoors, that essentially allow high-income earners and high-net-worth individuals to either move assets into Roth IRAs indirectly and or convert assets from traditional IRAs to Roth IRAs, thereby building tax-free wealth over time. So in today's video, we will highlight what a backdoor Roth IRA contribution is, why or when you might consider implementing this strategy over a long period of time. Additionally, for those who are either approaching or currently in retirement, what a Roth IRA conversion strategy looks like. Again, why you might consider implementing that strategy for your personal finances. And lastly, we'll show some real-world examples of physicians, business owners, executives, high-income earners who implement this strategy and kind of the outcomes or reasons why they might make sense for you personally as well. So to start, what is the problem or kind of what is this issue of not being able to put money into a Roth IRA? The simple answer is that under IRS rules, single filers who make over $168,000 per year or joint filers who make over $252,000 per year in 2026 are unable to make direct contributions to a Roth IRA. You can't take money from your checking account and put it directly into your Roth IRA. If you do, going to file your tax return, you're going to run into a variety of red flags and issues to be navigated around tax time. And so for high income earners, thinking physicians, business owners, maybe executives, or just anyone really in high income fields, you would read that or hear that and almost think like, well, I'm automatically disqualified from contributing to Roth IRAs. I can't put funds into them. The unfortunate reality, though, is that that is somewhat true and also somewhat false. There are ways for these high income households to get funds into a Roth IRA, whether directly or indirectly. It may take a little bit of additional legwork, but there are strategies and ways to go about doing that. And maybe most importantly, why would someone want to put funds or get funds into a Roth IRA to begin with, or a Roth 401k? The answer is that Roth accounts offer a variety of tax advantages that are unique to those account types that, especially for those in retirement, offer them a lot of advantages in their ability to create tax efficiencies in retirement as well. And a good refresher on all of this is comparing a traditional IRA to a Roth IRA. Funds that are put into Roths already have taxes paid on them. And so the flip side of that is when you go to withdraw funds from a Roth IRA, as long as you're meeting all the requirements of the account, those funds can be withdrawn tax-free, whether they are the principal or contributions to the account itself, or the earnings that have accrued within the account over the time that you've had it invested. But like we've said, if you're a high income earner, you're above those income limitations, it seems like on the surface, you can't put money into Roth accounts, and that's frankly not true. The reality is there's three kind of separate strategies or considerations that almost anyone, any high income earner, whether they're kind of just starting out in their careers to even those approaching or currently in retirement, can consider implementing to, again, find more tax efficiency within their overall financial picture. The first is what we call a backdoor Roth IRA contribution. This strategy could be implemented from anyone from age 18 to nearly retired. Even better, the longer it's done. But effectively what you are doing is getting assets into a Roth IRA done by contributions to a traditional IRA. And here in a second, we'll get into a little more on what that actually looks like and means. A second strategy is what we call a Mega Backdoor Roth IRA. If the Backdoor Roth was the 101, this is maybe 201. Effectively, if your workplace plan allows you, you are able to make even larger after-tax contributions into a Roth IRA done through what's called an after-tax 401k. It's kind of a unique feature. Not all plans offer this, but again, we will highlight some of the nuances of that here in a second. The last strategy that has a pretty broad applicability, but has very specific instances where it might be used, is what's called a Roth conversion, where we're moving assets from whatever pre-tax account we might have, we're paying taxes on that conversion, and we're moving those funds into a Roth IRA. Why would I want to pay taxes on that? Why would I want to expedite paying taxes? We'll get into why specifically that is the case here in a second. So to start, let's begin with a backdoor Roth contribution strategy. This, I find, is typically done for those who are high income earners. They've probably maxed out workplace retirement plans that have a match associated with them. Maybe they're contributing to a health savings account. Additionally, if they're a purely W-2 employee, there's only so many levers we can pull to get your taxes down today. HSAs can be a good benefit for that. I've done other videos on that. I will attempt to link it somewhere here in the video. And so once you've kind of optimized a lot of those strategies through work, The question becomes, well, where else can I invest funds? Typically, it's some combination for these households of a brokerage account and or a backdoor Roth strategy, ideally implemented over 10, 20 plus years. In 2026, for example, that amount is up to $7,500 per person or per spouse, for example. So a married couple who files jointly could put up to $15,000 into Roth IRAs indirectly via this strategy. And those contribution amounts index for inflation each year, roughly. The IRS sets whatever that amount might be. So again, a backdoor Roth strategy is typically ideally best implemented over 10, 20, 30 plus years. If not, time is on your side and is your friend in this instance. But even if it's a 5-year time horizon, there's still benefit, I think, to be had in doing so. The next strategy, if your plan allows it, especially if done over a 5 to 10 year or longer time frame, could be even more impactful in building Roth assets over the long term. And that is what's called a Mega Backdoor Roth IRA contribution. It is a mouthful, but with good reason. It has a huge impact and a real ability for high-income earners to move a lot of money into a Roth IRA in a relatively short period of time. So an important caveat or disclaimer before we dive into this one, in order for you to execute on this strategy, you have to have a retirement plan through work that allows you to do it. Your 401k has to have what's called an after-tax account. If you have a solo 401k, you can very likely implement this strategy. So the idea behind a Mega Backdoor Roth is fairly straightforward. Again, just like our Backdoor Roth contribution, we're maxing out whatever our workplace plans might be. That the benefit of that is simply that we likely get an employer match on top of just the tax savings today if we're doing pre-tax contributions. So you're effectively maxing out your 401k in whatever form that might be. And then from there, you are able to put even more funds away into that after-tax account. Once the funds are in that account, once you've made that contribution into the account, the vast majority of plan providers allow you to almost instantaneously convert it from that after-tax account into a Roth IRA, typically conveniently at their custodial location, whatever the platform is that your employer uses. But the benefit then is that you are able to make much larger Roth contributions into that account to then obviously turn around and invest and let that account grow over time. So as you could probably imagine, this strategy is incredibly powerful. It allows you to put so much more away than obviously beyond what kind of a base backdoor Roth contribution strategy allows. So as you might imagine, both backdoor Roth contribution strategies, whether it's kind of the basic one or a Mega Backdoor Roth, have a real implication to build Roth assets over time. The kicker or catch, though, is that if you're not implementing them over long periods of time, you're somewhat limited in the amount that you can actually put into the plan itself, especially with just a base backdoor Roth strategy. By contrast, a Roth conversion strategy, the third strategy we'll touch on, can work for basically anyone, but it's much more attractive in kind of a couple specific instances. So what is a Roth IRA conversion to begin with? Basically, very simply, it's taking assets from a pre-tax IRA and moving it into a Roth IRA. You pay tax on the conversion itself, but the benefit is that those assets, once moved into a Roth, can then obviously be invested and grow and compound tax-free. For high-income earners, that can be an attractive strategy to consider because, again, as we touched on earlier in the video, while you were working, if you were making pre-tax contributions to IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, 457bs, make some unique considerations there on that last one. So a good example of how a Roth IRA conversion can impact someone's financial plan positively is, in this instance, Joe and Jill Sample, you'll note their net worth's around $4.3 million, and of that, about $3.5 million are in investments. If we go into their actual financial plan and we pull up a few different screens that I think will be helpful to kind of illustrate this. First and foremost is their balance sheet. They've done a fantastic job of saving and investing. About 45% of that is in qualified retirement plans, specifically in pre-tax plans. So withdrawals from these accounts are going to generate ordinary taxable income, which is fine, but is, I think, a consideration when we get into our late 70s and 80s when we're in RMD status and having to take larger and larger amounts. A good illustration of that is Joe and Jill's cash flow. We'll note that Joe retires here at age 65. He starts taking RMDs here at 75 in 2045. Jill starts hitting RMD status 5 years later in 2050. And so you'll note this very thick, large orange bar. Their RMD amount in 2050 is almost $410,000. Above and beyond just Social Security they're getting and far in excess of kind of what they need to live off of. What that the expense line kind of tracks that, but basically in 2044 they go from needing about $265,000, granted that's inflation adjusted, but regardless, going from $265,000 to $413,000 in cash flow the following year. My hunch is they don't need $150,000 more in income, and it's really just that RMD that's really punishing them over that period. The answer, or kind of how do we mitigate that, is to more or less look at a Roth conversion. To say, if we convert, in this instance, we start with Joe's account and we start right when he retires, filling up tax brackets to the best of our abilities as we go. How does that impact us in our plan over the long term? Certainly it's good. We can see that we still RMDs are pretty significant, even implementing this strategy, but that we certainly take away some of the impact of that. A really great way to visualize that is looking at their total taxes over their lifetimes. They basically save about $1.5 million in taxes while also gaining in assets over that same time period. And a lot of it's just because they have reduced the impact of that RMD. Granted, they're paying more in taxes in these earlier years, so that certainly can feel less than pleasant when you're cutting big checks to the IRS. But if you anticipate living longer, as many people are today, the benefit of that Roth conversion can be really impactful in those later years. We've implemented this 10-year, really decade-long strategy of converting a pre-tax IRA into a Roth IRA, and in the process, effectively saved them a lot on taxes while also simultaneously growing assets. In general, if you're making pre-tax contributions to these account types, you were saving taxes as you were doing that because you weren't being taxed at that higher tax rate on the income that was going into the plan. But when you go to pull funds out of those accounts in retirement, you pay taxable income on the withdrawal. Ideally, you are doing so when you're in a lower income year, though. So if I was paying taxes, just for simplicity's sake, I was being taxed at an effective rate of 30% or 35% on my income while I was working. Once I'm retired, my income is, especially in kind of earlier years typically, is basically aligned to with whatever withdrawals I take from my pre-tax accounts. So I could be in the much lower tax brackets, 22% or lower, even if it's effective rates, that's 10, 15% lower than what I was paying when I was working if I'm withdrawing, assets from those pre-tax accounts at that time. So one of the considerations that high income earners often face is that as they're working, they're making contributions to pre-tax accounts. And what they end up with is a very large concentration of their assets, of all their retirement assets, in pre-tax accounts. A few considerations from that. The big one being that once most people today reach age 75, they are basically mandated to start taking what are called required minimum distributions from those pre-tax accounts. And maybe it starts off fairly small relative to whatever their income needs might be, their kind of cash flow needs might be in retirement. By the time they're in their maybe 80s, though, that RMD amount starts to creep up as a larger percentage of the total balance, to where there are individuals or households who are forced to take more money out in the form of an RMD than they even need to live off of. But effectively, they're paying more in taxes because they don't need all that cash. And so the idea or strategy can be that to take advantage of maybe those near retiree years, we implement a strategy of 5 to 10 years of Roth IRA conversions to effectively get assets out of those pre-tax accounts into Roth accounts to then reinvest it aggressively over time, to ideally mitigate or reduce our tax bill later on. So clearly, whether it's a backdoor Roth contribution or a Roth conversion, these strategies can have huge impacts over time. But the question I think that's important to address or even to pose is, what are some considerations I need to make on implementing any one of these? What are some kind of hiccups we see people run into? By and large, the biggest one, outside of just kind of tax considerations of Roth conversions, for that strategy specifically, is what are called IRMAA considerations around Medicare in general. The higher your income is, potentially there are surcharges you pay on Medicare premiums if you're in certain higher income tax brackets. The other consideration for especially the backdoor strategies is what's called the pro rata rule. Effectively, what the rule stands for or means is that if you're doing backdoor Roth contributions, you essentially can't have assets in a traditional IRA beyond just the amount that you contribute and then immediately convert over to the Roth. A whole host of reasons behind that, and I will not get into all of the hairy details just because it gets very complicated. So general rule, without too much into the weeds, is making sure that traditional IRA balances are kept to a minimum or ideally zero. If you have a balance in an IRA, the actual fairly straightforward answer is you can convert or transfer that pre-tax IRA balance into a 401k that you might have, or a solo 401k, for example, that you might have if you're self-employed or through your business. As you can clearly see, there's a variety of different options for high income earners to consider in getting assets into Roth type accounts. And a lot of it is frankly just, how do we view your current financial situation? What options or levers can we pull that's available to you specifically? And then, more or less, how can we look at implementing those strategies over long periods of time, or within whatever best period of time we can find, to make sure that we are getting the kind of efficiencies and optimal outcomes that ideally we want to have. So if you're a high income household, $500,000 or more of annual income, or you've built up a good base of pre-tax assets, you're looking to retirement and trying to figure out, how do I go about this as tax efficiently as possible? Looking at some sort of Roth strategy, whether it's a backdoor contribution strategy, a mega backdoor contribution strategy, or a Roth conversion strategy, approaching or in retirement, all can be very impactful for long-term planning and finding tax efficiencies based on the kind of current asset base and their tax implications that you might have. The reality is, you have options for getting assets into Roth accounts, and it can be a great complement to building an overall base of kind of different tax locations and tax implications for our different account types, so that when we are in retirement, again, I love the quiver and arrow analogy, we have more arrows in our quiver to create a tax efficient income stream for us to fund for retirement and for really throughout our lives. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Scott Sturgeon, Senior Wealth Advisor and founder of Oriad Wealth Partners. We help physicians, business owners, and high income earners navigate tax complexities, build wealth, and find tax efficiencies in retirement as well. If any of this has resounded with you, consider checking out a few of the links below, whether it's our blog, our newsletter, or consider scheduling a free assessment with us, just to see if working with us might be a good fit, to learn more about you, your personal financial situation, and how working with Oriad Wealth Partners might bring value to finding a path to retirement and beyond. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great rest of your day.